Good evening, members of council, ladies and gentlemen. I see that we have quorum, and I call this regular meeting for the Town of Pelham Council for Tuesday, February 18th, to order. We will begin with an invocation led by Councillor Durley, followed by the singing of the national anthem led by Councillor Papp. All rise.
Dear God, who has given us grace to make our common goals unto Thee, and who does promise that when two or more are gathered unto Thy name, You will grant their requests. Lord, we supplicate Your blessing upon this assembly. Fulfill now, O Lord, the petitions of Thy servants as may be expected of them. Grant all in this council chambers the knowledge of trust, justice, and honor in all considerations placed before them. Provide us in this chamber, O Lord, strong minds and discerning spirit as we deliberate over the business of our town, that we may move forever forward to ensure the town of Pelham continues to be a vibrant, caring, and creative community. May God bless all in this community and grant us all in this chamber the wisdom, will, and generosity to guide the town of Pelham through the challenges and successes that lie ahead. Amen.
Amen.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot law, in all thy sons' command, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God, keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. The first item of business is the approval of the agenda. It's been moved by Councillor Rybak, seconded by Councillor King, that the agenda for the February 18th, 2014 meeting of council be adopted. Are there any changes to that agenda? Councillor Lane?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, if I could, I'd like to add under new business number 15, an item on regarding parking at the municipal building here.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Councillor Papp? All those in favor of that amendment? That amendment carries. Are there any other changes to the agenda? There being none, I call the question on the amended agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried as amended. The next item is disclosure of pecuniary interest and the general nature thereof. That is any conflicts of interest that any members may have. Do any members have any conflicts of interest they need to declare? Can that be noted in the minutes, please? Thank you. Next, we'll move to hearing of presentations, delegations, and the regional reports. We have quite a couple of extensive presentations this evening. The first is regarding a draft detailed site master plan. It's Mr. Palmer and Mr. Linster and Mr. Allen joining them later on, I believe. So I would ask Mr. Palmer to come forward. Good to see you again.
Always great to be here. Dave Linster from my office, one of my partners and the head of our landscape architecture group, is going to help me with the presentation. It's about 36 slides, so I'm going to go through them fairly quickly, hopefully giving you a good flavor of where we are and what we're doing and what happens next. I've never used a PC in my life before. Yes, and say it's that. Perfect. We're going to talk a little bit about the context of the site, area that we're looking at specifically, as well as a concept plan. It's important to remember that the concept plan is a concept plan. It's still a work in progress. We've been working with our partners from the Allen Group, trying to come to agreement on a plan, and we're getting close, but we're not completely there yet. I'm going to talk a little bit about the kinds of land uses that we're proposing on the two properties, and the land uses and statistics that go along with that. Dave is going to talk about the public realm network, the streets, the trails, the parks and squares that are incorporated into the plan. And I'm going to close with a discussion of what the contents of the urban design guidelines that follow will be, and we'll show some models of the development from a variety of different angles, just to close out the presentation. First of all, we are talking about the East Fonthill site at the corner of Rice Road and Regional Road 20. I wanted to show this slide to show its proximity to the existing downtown core, and of course to the south, all of that land that is subject of our newly approved secondary plan for the East Fonthill area. It's a fairly good sized site with a lot of frontage on Regional Road 20 and on Rice Road. And here is the first iteration of our plan. It does include an array of land uses, and it does utilize the basic road pattern that was first established in the secondary plan and subsequently refined through further work. In terms of the plan itself, we've divided it into 6 blocks. We're not dealing with everything in between this site and the downtown, although it's important to recognize the connection between the downtown and town hall and this site, as well as to the lands to the south. Just to give you an idea of where we are in terms of gross floor area, of those 6 blocks that you can see identified on this plan, I've estimated a total of about 1.3 million square feet of floor space in a whole array of retail, commercial, medical office, community center, residential, seniors housing, and anything that goes along with those uses. So it's a fairly significant development. It won't happen all at once. It'll happen bit by bit, but it's important to have an idea of what the comprehensive plan looks like as a starting point. In talking about land uses, I've identified the primary land uses on this map. Some are more confirmed than others. For example, we believe the retail is going to be focused primarily on the site with frontage on Regional Road 20. Further to the east, we expect a medical cluster, opportunities for some mixed-use commercial, a retirement village, and so on. To the south of that is where we've identified the community center, and that site also has opportunities for mixed-use commercial, mixed-use residential. Crossing the street, again, a small mixed-use commercial and some townhouse development. Again, all of these uses permitted in the approved secondary plan. The mixture of uses is not defined in the plan, so we have the opportunity to put whatever mix of appropriate uses we wish into this important center in Fonthill. Dave, if you want to just go through some of the public realm components.
Right, so you can see here, I'm going to speak to the streets, to the parks and trails, into a new model of the urban square that we're introducing in the East Fonthill plan. So to begin with the streets, one of the things that we really are trying to do here, and I'll illustrate this through the series of cross sections that you have in front of you, is to show that these streets are really complete streets in the sense that they're about pedestrians, they're about cyclists, it's about moving people in vehicles as well. You can park on these streets. They really serve really an important community function. And there's a hierarchy of streets. So we have, I'll describe these. Actually, just let me go back one. I'm going the other way. Actually, here we go. The hierarchy of streets. There's the main street there. You can see in purple, sort of the central kind of an idea here about a sort of shopping street. The ceremonial street in red, you can see there that links the downtown area with East Fonthill. We have a green street, that's a kind of boulevarded street that links Highway 20 with the ceremonial route, a really different character. Again, and then a series of local streets, kind of tertiary series. And the ceremonial route, what really distinguishes this street is that it's really designed as a street that has a certain kind of grandeur to it. So in one section of that street, there's a central boulevard, so it really kind of notches up its significance from that perspective. And in other areas, there's a broad kind of green, really band or kind of one-sided boulevard down the edge. So it has kind of a more of a park, more of a parkway-like quality to it than the other streets do, and you can see that in those two cross sections. The main street, a much tighter profile, lined with large street trees. The idea here is to get the sidewalks adjacent to those commercial uses. You get that activated edge potentially where cafes and other commercial uses would reside. The local greenway up the one side that I mentioned, connecting the ceremonial route with Highway 20. Again, a kind of boulevarded street, a little different from the main street in that sense. You can also see on that one how the cycling would be integrated in both those cross sections. And on the ceremonial route, we have two turning circles that incorporate cycling, but these are really major, I would say, significant traffic calming measures, but also again contribute to that parkway quality of that street type. And again, just the consolidated plan here, showing how those streets link into the other public spaces. Of course, linked to the public spaces, as I mentioned, the pedestrian really having a special importance in this street model. Obviously, that tying into the paths, and the associated parks throughout this neighborhood, and then looking again at how that walkway and path system will link into the larger planning framework as the area is developed out over time. So one of the important spaces that we're also looking at here are a series of public squares, and we imagine that these squares have different purposes, really different functions. They're multi-purpose, and I'll show you how they operate. There's some of them that are embedded into the community. The smaller ones, we see them as kind of greener spaces, but that are really for families, for seniors to enjoy at different times of the year. But these are kind of semi-programmed spaces, but they can be used in different ways for a small gathering, for picnics, and as I mentioned, for families as well, or maybe just if you're working nearby to have lunch outdoors in the summer. They contain kind of similar programming elements. There are lots of examples around, and frankly, you have a few here as well. The larger public square in the center, just the one that's right on Main Street. So in this diagram, Main Street is running kind of up and down in that illustration, that Main Street model that I illustrated previously. So we see this square really engaging with the street. It's a kind of center of East Fonthill. It can be programmed for different kinds of events. We could see, for example, a farmer's market there on a Saturday. There could be cafes around the edge in association with those buildings. It would be a place where you could imagine people would gather at different times of the day. In the evening, there could be a small concert as well, or really just a place to hang out and enjoy different times of the year, maybe aside from February, outside. So Ron, I'm going to hand it back to you for this section.
One of the things that we are required to do by the secondary plan is include urban design guidelines that will guide the form of development within the plan. And certainly we have a whole variety of topics that we will be focusing on in order to make sure that this place looks the way that council wants it to look, and that functions the way that the developers need it to function in order to be a successful commercial and mixed-use center. Certainly when we talk about standalone retail and commercial buildings, we'll be looking at storefronts, materials, weather protection, facade articulation, and parking configurations. We want to make sure that this is of the highest quality and shows as the highest quality that we can possibly get here in Fonthill. The institutional buildings are always important, particularly the community center. If the town wants to set the stage for quality, that is an opportunity to make it the best building in the center. And we'll be working on some guidelines on how that might develop over time. Obviously, signage is a crucial element of this form of development. We want to make sure that the signage is an appropriate signage type for the forms of development that are proposed, where they should go, how big they should be, whether or not they're lit. All of those issues need to be dealt with in terms of having a clear and consistent signage strategy that will manage the visual appearance of that signage as you walk or drive along the street. These are a variety of demonstration models. This one looking, let's see here, looking southward over Regional Road 20 down into the development. You can see some of the major building elements that are starting to emerge, where the height might go, and where height is not anticipated. Yellow is typically residential. Gray is primarily commercial or retail, commercial, or office. The purple are a mix of seniors housing, community facilities, and other mixed-use forms of development. I don't know why I have two of all of these, except there's a better shadow on each second one. This is looking eastward from existing downtown across over to Rice Road. This one looking northwards as we see this part of the community connecting to the lands to the south in the larger secondary plan area. This one looking a little bit, I would say, northwest. What's great about this is the significant green space that is accumulated with the stormwater management ponds in the parks, and how that interconnects with the plan and its evolution over time. This one's looking straight down Highway 20 to the west. This is an important view because that storm pond at the front is the entrance point to Fonthill, and it will need to make a statement both with built form and landscape of the importance of that entry. And that's what we have for you tonight. Happy to answer any questions that we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Palmer, Mr. Lister, for your presentation. Do members of council have any questions for our presenters? At this time, very comprehensive in what you've done. I do have a question on just about parking. There's some parking spots there. The intention is that it's to, I think the idea behind this is to maintain our small town feel, and sometimes those parking lots, big parking lots, don't
Yes.
maintain that feel. Can you just speak to that a little bit, please?
Yes, I think Mr. Mayor is speaking about the fairly large collection of parking along Rice Road in proximity to where the community center is proposed. Those are quite large parking spots, parking lots. And while I was doing the calculations and we were getting up around 1.3 million square feet, I said perhaps we leave a few places where future development might go. Certainly, we'll need to understand the use of the community center and what goes in there, and we want to make sure we have the right amount of parking for that. But these three very large parking lots, I think, over time could be developed with buildings. I'm happy to make adjustments to the plan to show that. But I would like to know a little bit better about what's going on inside the community center and understand the parking requirements for that before we start proposing additional building footprints in those locations. Certainly that would be the objective, particularly at the intersection.
Thank you. I think, I guess the reason I asked the question is from feedback from the community about the idea of more walkable parking areas. That's all, as opposed to how they might appear on our lands or on other lands. So,
Yes,
can you
if you're
just
gonna
comment
ask-
on that?
If you're going to ask the private sector to break down their parking lots with greenery, then you should do it yourself as well, and you should be the group that does the best job. So we'll look at that again
Okay.
and talk about how it might unfold, either as smaller parking lots or built form.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Durley, discussion's prompted a question. Go ahead, sir.
It did, yes. I'm looking, we're known as a bedroom community, and I'm just wondering if these parking spaces could use dual duty in carpool parking areas where people can carpool and, meet there to take their work out of town and that. Is there a possibility to incorporate that in that, since we're going to have larger areas that likely won't be used during the day?
I think that you'd want to talk about that as a potential interim use, but the goal at the end of the day is to have the right amount of parking for the right amount of built form. But absolutely, this is not going to all be built at the same time, so why not? If that's a need in the community, why not consider it as an interim use?
Okay, and it can be developed further down the road, but certainly that is a possibility then. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Papp and then Councillor Creasy.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, through you. Thank you very much. Just something prompted me when you were just mentioning this, and I was reading back on some of the information we had prior to this, and recently we had a discussion with a gentleman by the name of Mr. Gord Hume. One of the things he talked about as we develop and evolve this whole community is about the technology, the interconnectivity that the community itself and I'm thinking of, and I'm not sure, maybe even though there's one Mattamy community, and I hate to give them a plug, but where everything is interconnected, like everything's built in, no matter residential, it's all, so all of the latest technology is there. Is this something around that we need to, like, I don't think we've ever, maybe we have talked about it, I'm not aware of it, but I would presume that all of this, whether it's commercial, retail, residential, would include all those components?
Well, certainly, I think in terms of the technology that connects us all, that changes very dramatically and very quickly. But the objective of having everything connected, I think, is an appropriate one. I would have to do some thinking about how that would be implemented.
Right.
And whether or not we need to do anything specific to do that. I know
Whether
one
that
development in
impacts-
Ottawa
impacts the plan,
that
yeah.
was all fiber optic.
Right.
And then 2 years later, fiber optics were not popular anymore. So I think the electronic connectivity is a good objective, and then let me think about how it would work.
And to build on, the only reason, one of the reasons is that I know that they've pointed towards the city of Stratford, that in effect, everything there, technically, simplistically, I'm just saying, is connected.
Yeah,
So
okay.
things along, and just be interesting to see what would we want to incorporate, and how would we go about doing that? And I'd be interested in your thoughts.
It's a good selling point
You know,
as
like,
well.
people would come here because we already talked and I don't want to, how many businesses we have at home that are digitally connected to their offices
Right.
downtown Toronto. They don't, or the world, they don't really need to travel anywhere, they just do it electronically. So it'll be fascinating to see that, so, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for that latitude.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kersey?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have one question. The secondary plan envisioned live workspaces,
Yes.
and I wondered, were they envisioned in the mixed-use commercial, or could you comment on that and how you envisioned that working into the grand scheme of things?
Live work is a permitted use throughout these areas. And I don't think you have to do anything extraordinary to facilitate live work. Live work is, however, typically a townhouse built form. And I could see opportunities for live work along the north-south road that goes past Sobeys and potentially along the Grand Boulevard in the yellow components. If you put them on the main street, they typically start off as residential and may evolve into live work over time. And I don't think you would want it to be residential first on the main street. But certainly in those other areas where townhouses are proposed, that's a viable and useful option.
So the bylaw would support that
Yeah,
as it's developed.
yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions at this time? Well, thank you very much for your presentation, and as you said, it is the first draft of the master plan, and I'm sure there'll be many iterations as we move forward, but I want to thank you on behalf of council for your work on this, and really listening to the community and to council, and reading through the secondary plan and trying to bring it to life, connecting this development with the existing Fonthill area, ensuring that it's walkable, cyclable, connected, not only electronically, but really connected as a community, and adding to the community as opposed to taking away. So that's what I'm seeing there, and I want to thank you on behalf of my council colleagues. That I think you've done that, and we certainly look forward to moving forward. I guess I didn't ask you timing or what the next steps are, and then we're going to have Mr. Allen speak just briefly about his lands.
From our perspective, the next steps in this process, keeping in mind that the site plan is likely to continue to evolve for the next little while, but the town of Pelham needs to consider an official plan amendment to take your own lands and give them the appropriate designation that matches the lands of the Allen Group. That was anticipated in the secondary plan and something that we need to do. Also, components of this plan, I think are ready, or are just about ready to move forward with zoning. And we may wish to also at the same time consider site plan approval through the same process. So within the next month or so, I think we'll be ready to talk about the official plan amendment, what may be rezoned first, and whether or not we're going to use site plan at the same time as zoning, depending on the speed with which we want to move forward. But we're pretty much ready to prepare those documents and get them before you in the spring.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that update and look forward to continuing to work with you on this. Thank you.
Looking forward to it ourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can we do these together?
Mr. Allen? We wanted to give you the opportunity as well to maybe flesh out some of the details that are being proposed, since much of the development is what you're working on.
Yeah. I'd be
Thank you for
pleased-
joining us this evening.
I'd be pleased to kind of run through where we are from our perspective. I'll keep my remarks brief because a lot of what I'm going to say, council's heard before in terms of the users we're bringing to the table. As background, I just want to talk about how we got to where we are from our perspective, which is different than what Ron outlined. So we've been working with the town for about 18 months to jointly develop the lands that the town owns and the lands that we own in the commercial retail block. At the beginning of that process, we agreed with the town to look at those acres as if they were a single ownership, to come up with a development that put each component use in the best location, and then sort out how we went from there. It's been an exciting and at times frustrating process we've been inventing as we went along. Users went from one location to another as the process got refined. But I think at this point we can say, fortunately, for every one step back, we have come 2 steps forward. So I think we're close to a final iteration of the plan. As Ron said, what he's shown you is not the final product, but it provides the skeleton on which we can put some flesh and bones now. We've been working with staff and council, a lot of consultants, and now we have to move from concept to bricks and mortar. So our job as the developer is to find the common ground between the day-to-day requirements of the users we bring to the table and the vision that the town has, that Ron has just put before you. So this is what we have to do now. So far, we've had a great relationship with the town and the consultants, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't continue along this path and have a great development. So I'd like to spend a few minutes just talking about the users that we have in place, their status, and as I said, some of this you've heard before. An important part as well will be the agreement with the town, and Mr. Shedden will be talking about that in just a few minutes. The medical center is currently looking at approximately 30,000 square feet and is being proposed by the developers of the Little Lake Medical Complex in Barrie, Dr. Dave Bouchy and Rob Heckenberg. For the last 18 months, town staff and the mayor have been working with Drs. Bouchy and Heckenberg on this development, and without their input and help, I don't believe we'd have what I think is going to be a very exciting and viable facility. So the current proposal would be similar to what they have in Barrie, which is family doctors, specialists, facilities for minor surgery, pharmacy, lab, physiotherapy, optometry, radiology, geriatric clinic, health and wellness clinic, nurses, nurse practitioners, and other allied health professionals such as social workers, counselors, dietitians. Dr. Bouchy has been here before, and as the development moves forward, I'm sure you'll hear from him again. In close proximity to the medical center will be a seniors development built by Baybridge Seniors Housing. Baybridge is a wholly owned subsidiary of the Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. Robert Easer's been down here before to talk about that, and he certainly brings a lot of credibility and financial strength to the table. Their current proposal is for approximately 120 units of independent living, assisted living, and memory care. In addition, they're proposing 8 seniors townhouses that will be integrated with the seniors apartments for those who are even more independent but would like to use some of the services of the main retirement facility. Again, Baybridge is waiting for us to conclude our agreement with the town in order to move forward, as is the medical clinic. Both Little Lake and Baybridge would like to begin construction in 2015, but this is dependent on us making significant progress towards servicing in 2014. So time is an issue, and we're certainly like to move forward as quickly as possible. For our first phase of the development, we're proposing a commercial retail complex for approximately 80,000 square feet. The plaza will be anchored by a major grocery chain and include ancillary uses such as fast food, service businesses, and in general retailers who will provide both for the existing population and the new community that will develop to the south over the next few years. The commercial study, which was done as part of the secondary plan process, pointed out a significant current retail deficit. Our development will help the town capture much of the shopping dollars that are currently being spent elsewhere. Once again, we would hope to begin construction of that in 2015. In order for us to meet the deadlines, as I said before, there's a lot of work to be done, and we look forward to working with staff and town consultants to get it done as soon as possible.
Thank you very much for your
My
presentation.
remarks, if any questions, I'd be glad to do the best to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Allen, for your presentation, for outlining those items, and again, giving us that timeline that you're working on, and we're trying to work toward as well. Do members of council have any questions for Mr. Allen at this time? No? Okay, you've been very complete, and you've kept us up to date on your progress, as his staff kept council up to date on progress as well. So I want to thank you very much for your presentation, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this, and so we can move it, continue to move the yardstick forward. Thank you very much, Mr. Allen. I do have a motion, and it has been moved by Councillor King, seconded by Councillor Durley, that the information submitted by the delegation, Ron Palmer of the Planning Partnership, David Lister, and David Allen of the Allen Group regarding the detailed site master plan for East Fonthill be received. Any comments or questions? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you again for those presentations. Our next presentation is from our solicitor, Mr. Shedden, regarding East Fonthill updates. Okay. Thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I guess there's a couple of updates in terms of the overall official plan. As you're aware, we did have the board decision recently that approved the East Fonthill secondary plan. We're back at the municipal board on March 11th. It's our intention to try to have the bulk of the official plan approved at that time by the board. Town staff and planning consultants have been working very diligently, narrowing the issues. There are one or two issues that remain that we're working on, but we're confident that we can get the bulk of the plan approved, or at least we can make our presentation to the board and ask for the board's approval. As you know, the board is taking a significant amount of time to release its decisions these days, typically 3 to 4 months. So it's important for us to get that approved at the March 11th date so that we can, within a few months, have a final decision on that. The issues that still remain deal with Lafarge's concerns about some restrictions that the region has put into the official plan concerning approval of new pits and quarries. But as I said, we're waiting now for the region to respond to some issues raised by Lafarge. Hope to have that shortly. And then we can proceed with our motion for approval. So that's what's happening with the remainder of the official plan.
Thank you.
In terms of moving this proposed comprehensive development forward, as you're aware, the parcels shown up on the block plan, parts 1, 2, and 6 are owned by the town, and parts 3, 4, and 5 are owned by the group represented by Mr. Allen. In order to develop this property in a comprehensive manner, as outlined by Mr. Palmer and Mr. Allen, well, first you need a willing private sector partner, which you have in Mr. Allen, so that's very important for the town. Second, you need an agreement, and there are a number of very important components of that agreement that need to be addressed. First, you have to address servicing. It doesn't make sense to service these 6 blocks individually. You want to have a servicing plan where the roads, sanitary sewer, water, stormwater management is dealt comprehensively, and the cost of installing those services is fairly shared by the town and by the private developer. And that can be accomplished in an agreement between the town and the developer. The other factor in doing servicing with the town and a private sector developer, the town has procurement policies which require tendering for this type of development. That's common practice in private sector developments in any event, but any agreement with the private sector developer would have to ensure that the town's procurement policies are respected in terms of hiring of contractors to install these services. So that would have to go into the agreement in terms of servicing. Some of the development proposed to occur on town lands in terms of parcels 1 and 2 for Retirement Home and Medical Center would necessitate the sale of lands by the town to the developer. Again, the town has process and bylaws in place that have to be respected in terms of the sale of land. So that would have to be incorporated into the agreement. Second part of that is that the Municipal Act contains a provision in Section 106, which is the bonusing provision. So essentially, the town cannot give an advantage to the Allen Group in transferring this property. The property has to be transferred for fair value, and fair value can be both in terms of the cash value and other services provided by the Allen Group in that regard. But that's a very important component of any agreement, is that the agreement has to provide a net benefit to the town so that it doesn't run afoul of Section 106 of the Municipal Act. And Section 106 of the Municipal Act has been getting some use in recent days and years in Niagara. Fort Erie had a situation where someone brought a challenge against an agreement Fort Erie entered into with a developer. Fort Erie was ultimately successful. The problem is it's very expensive and it delays you by 6 months to a year by the time you get it in front of a judge. So we need the agreement to be very clear and plain that it demonstrates a net benefit to the town. So that's crucial to the agreement. And finally, I would suggest that in the agreement we have to address the issue that the town owns some of these lands, and the planning approval process requires the town council to make decisions on land owned by the town. For, I suppose, transparency and fairness reasons, it would be appropriate to require outside planning consultants to write the reports. So it's not town staff writing a report to be approved by town council. It would make it much more defensible if it went to the Ontario Municipal Board if we had an outside planning consultant writing these reports. So those are the primary components that we need to see in an agreement. As Mr. Allen said, we've been having discussions, and there's been some back and forth. There's been some drafts shuffled back and forth, but we're not there yet by a long shot. But of course, anything that we put down on paper has to come back in front of this council for your approval and your discussion before anything can move forward. So those are basically my comments tonight. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shedden, for your presentation. Do members of council have any questions for Mr. Shedden at this time? Okay. Thank you very much. May I have a motion to receive that oral report? Moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Ribiak. No discussion to that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you very much for your presentation. We appreciate it. Thank you very much, Mr. Allen, as well, for your presentation, and we look forward to continuing to work with you on this process, and look forward to this. This is just the start of it in terms of this draft master plan that's come forward, and so there's, as was outlined by Mr. Palmer, there's much more that has to be done. So, but we look forward to working with you on that. So thank you very much. We'll now move to the report from our regional councillor, Councillor Brady. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and staff. I'll bring some attention to about 5 items in my written report. Under corporate services, the public safety dispatch review involving several of the emergency responders, first responders, I'm hoping will lead to a coordination so we don't always have 3 different vehicles going to a call. That could be the end result of this particular process. I think it's a good start, and especially for communities such as ours that relies on volunteer firefighters, I think it's basically something that should be looked at for hopefully an improvement in the future. Under integrated community planning, I just wanted to mention the first one, talking about the 1406 Love Street. You'll recognize that as being opposite the hospital, and it's currently a golf driving range. The poor people that own, in my opinion, the poor people on that property have been dealt a bad hand by the government over time in terms of the taking some of their property for the expansion of the 406, the salt coming from Queen Elizabeth, etc. It's not usable as agricultural property. And it's a case where we are going to be doing something to try and get the province to right that wrong. They should have bought the entire property in its totality back when they were doing it a couple of decades ago. Down a little bit later towards the bottom, received a report in terms of Niagara Employment Land Strategy Phase 2 for non-gateway communities. That includes the community of Pelham and all others that aren't considered to be in the Canal Corridor Gateway Center or Zone. Under Public Health and Social Services, I bring to your attention the workshop that has been prompted by your mayor in terms of visiting our committee, and I thank you, Mayor, for allowing the town of Pelham to be the host for that next Friday, and looking at ways to poverty as it affects single parents who are on Ontario Work. So we've got a group of stakeholders. I think it's probably just short of 20. We'll be meeting here next Friday for a great problem-solving session. So appreciate that.
Thank you.
And the last item I want to bring to your attention under Public Works is the item with respect to the transfer agreements, the service area expansion for Niagara Road 12, in that you are one of the 4 municipalities that share in the use of the Niagara Road 12 landfill site. Okay, that's my report, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Other than to say that we have had, in terms of the regional council, the last one, we had basically the referendum issue has been put to rest, and that there will not be referendum questions at all, and that we are now in receipt of a new Commissioner of Public Works. That's a number of senior officials, and I think I draw your attention, if you've not seen it in the local media, very positive feelings about, while there's been massive change at the senior level of the region, there's no question. The hope for that is that the region, I think, is going to be less of a pyramid in working with the local municipalities and more the hub of a wheel in working cooperatively with the 12 municipalities. I think that's a good sign in terms of governance for Niagara.
Thank you very much, Councillor Beatty, for your report. I wonder if any members of council have any questions for you at this time regarding your report. Councillor Pat?
Just out of curiosity, the workshop this Friday or next Friday, is this based on what Hugh Siegel?
That's correct.
Is that part of his presentation that he did at the Community Foundation? Is
That's
that what
correct.
That's about?
So I attended, as you did, and
So did
others
I, yeah.
attended that
Okay.
that workshop or that presentation, and I spoke to regional staff following that and said, what along these similar lines that Hugh Siegel was talking about poverty across Canada, is there something that we might do in the region? It was determined at that time that the fuzzy situation, to use the language of the creative problem-solving process, is how might we transition single-parent families off of Ontario Works quicker. So that's the challenge that we've set. Certainly, a number of regional staff are there from the community services area, also economic development, Brock University, Niagara College, the YWCA, other community partners. It's intended to be sort of a more comprehensive discussion to try to start working at that challenge.
Is it an open invitation or is it select?
It's a select group. And we did the work there with the.
Okay.
You do the pre-consult and those are those.
I'm
that were
interested to see
involved.
what the results are. A lot of
And,
work.
and the committee, the Public Health and Social Services Committee said, go ahead and do it, and I think Councillor Beatty offered to participate, and a report will be going to the region.
Okay.
And there may be some value with that report of going out to a broader public consultation
Wouldn't
in
hurt.
terms of the direction that it has.
So we'll see what the results are. I think United Ways are also invited to be involved and et cetera, so,
Okay,
Okay.
that's good to hear.
yeah, poor cares. Others? Other questions? All right, thank you very much, Councillor Beatty, for your presentation, for your work. It has been moved by Councillor Durley, seconded by Councillor King, that the February 18th, 2014 regional report submitted by Regional Councillor Beatty be received for information. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item, it's been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that the following minutes be adopted as printed, circulated, and read. Minutes of the special meeting of council of January 27th, 2014, and of the regular meeting of council of February 3rd, 2014. Are there any errors or omissions in those minutes? Okay. There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you. The next item is consent agenda items to be considered in block. Are there any items that members of council would like to lift for separate consideration? There being none, has been moved by Councillor Papp, seconded by Councillor Kersey. The following consent agenda items be received and the recommendations contained therein be approved as applicable. 1, recommendations of Committee of the Whole of February 3rd, 2014. 2, recommendations of Committee of the Whole of February 10th, 2014. 3 and 4 are the minutes of those Committee of the Whole meetings. Number 5, staff reports of a routine nature for information or action. We have one item. It's a recommendation regarding the proposed amendment to permit an institutional use located at 170 Highway 20 West. Number 6, action correspondence of a routine nature. There are 2 items. The first is the regional report regarding the update to the Memorandum of Understanding to improve the planning function. And the second is some letters from some students of St. Anne Elementary School regarding the Maple Acre Library. Number 7 is information correspondence items. A thank you card from the Gerard family, a thank you card from the Bizzato Hollingshead family, and 4 items of correspondence from the region. The first, implementation of the Smarter Niagara Incentives Program. The second, Niagara Employment Land Strategy Phase 2, non-gateway communities. The third, amending the waste management transfer agreements that Councillor Beatty spoke about earlier. The fourth, notice of the meeting to consider proposed regional policy plan amendment to Hamlet policies. And then the final block of items, the 8th block, is committee minutes for information, and there are 3. The first is the Pelham Active Transportation Committee minutes of January 21st. The second, Committee of Adjustment minutes of February 4th. And the third, the Mayor's Youth Advisory Committee minutes of December 17th. Are there any items that members of council would like to discuss? Councillor Kersey and Ribiak. Councillor Kersey.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 3 items that I'd like to speak to. Under the Committee of the Whole minutes, in the section dealing with Christmas in Pelham final report, I believe I made a motion that the Christmas in Pelham Committee become a committee of council and that a terms of reference be developed around that. And I don't see that reflected here. I can't remember whether it was a motion or whether it was a reference to staff.
I think it,
Staff direction, I believe.
the clerk is saying she believes it's staff direction. Ms. Van Ravensway, is that?
Yeah, okay, that's great.
Okay,
That's great.
thank you.
Second item I'd like to speak to is 11.4.1, the memorandum of understanding with respect to the planning function. Basically, just a comment that it's pleasant to see and exciting to see that region and the 12 municipalities, the signatories to this MOU, are looking for ways to simplify and accelerate that very complex planning process, which has become a very frustrating process for the private sector developers. And I particularly like the fact that the region has signed off on a number of significant items, allowing the local municipalities to be the main deciding and administer of those sections, and that they would be basically just commenting agencies. I think it would be very prudent and interesting to receive a report from our planning staff commenting on the MOU and what steps are being undertaken within our own department to implement some of the changes that are here to reflect the initiatives that have been forward in the MOU. So, Mr. Mayor, I'd ask that perhaps we could have a report come forward from staff at some future date with respect to that.
Okay. I'm going to call on Ms. Smythe to perhaps comment on the MOU and some of the steps that are being taken, and if a report can be generated. I know you don't have the director in place, but perhaps Ms. Smythe, you can comment, please.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Yes, the intention of planning staff is to prepare a supplemental report to council for consideration with respect to the steps taken. One, my particular involvement was with a workshop held in October, this past October, which essentially was able to get all the stakeholders, that being from the public and private sector, as to how to work collectively with the region and area municipalities to improve the system, planning function system. And now that has been presented to the region council, and now it's the intent to every area municipality to present to their individual councils for consideration and adoption. And so to answer that question, it is our intent to bring that forward.
And I thank you. And I think, Councillor, that is in the recommendation. The correspondence be received and the staff be directed to review the report.
Beautiful.
So, thank you. And any others on that memorandum? I'm just going to comment, and maybe I shouldn't comment, but just harkens back to Councillor Durley's work. And this is many years ago, but it started the ball rolling in the discussion. So this is something that's not only with this particular council, but previous councils trying to refine this planning function. And I'm hoping through this, as I'm sure you are as well, that we're getting very close to it. In your comments about it being the region being more of a commenting agency as opposed to getting into the nitty gritty. And I know that's the work that Councillor Durley worked on to try to extricate the region from some of those more local issues. So thank you for that, Councillor. And your third item.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The final item that I'd like to comment on is the Niagara Employment Land Strategy Phase 2 non-gateway communities. And I'm hoping to make a referral to staff to have staff identify to us what employment lands we have within our jurisdiction, the types of services that are provided to those employment lands, whether they're dry or whether they are serviced or partially serviced, and to also look at the strategy that's being put forward by the region in their Phase 2 report, and give us an estimation of the implications of that on our employment lands going forward, and what the implications will mean to the community in terms of developing our agricultural sector and also any light industrial lands that we might be administering.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Smythe, can you comment on that report? I believe it's been circulated. I don't know if it's been approved. You familiar with that particular report?
Sure, Mr. Mayor, through you. We haven't had an opportunity to thoroughly review. I know that there are meetings planned in the near future with the consultant on the development of that. So I believe that planning staff will be in attendance at the upcoming meeting. And then, again, the planning staff will likely report back to council on that matter.
Okay, so it's a work in progress as opposed to a final report?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Does that help, Councillor?
Yeah, I think that's great, Mr. Mayor. Will that report coming back identify the inventory of lands that we have and their facilities and all of that, so that as we develop our economic development strategy, we'll have an understanding of what we have to offer and all of those sectors that we could look at developing?
Having reviewed, and council, I don't think received the entire report, and perhaps with the clerk's help, we can give you the link to that report. But in reviewing it on the regional side, it does include all of the lands that have been identified, as I understand it, in our official plan, which are predominantly along the Weber Road corridor, dry industrial, as you made reference to. It does also include the lands in the East Font Hill area, because that official plan, well, now I guess when I asked the question, the secondary plan hadn't been adopted yet, so now it does not include those lands. But it did up to and including the time that the municipal board had approved that decision. So my read of it is that it does match the official plan. Ms. Smythe?
Through to you. Just more recently, there's been a member of regional staff, Mr. Reynolds, with the economic development, had contacted planning staff to actually inquire about certain economic development in the last 2 years. One of that being infrastructure improvements, new businesses, expansion to businesses, as well as any closures of businesses as well with respect to economic development within the town. So that information we're collecting and going to be providing in the next couple of days. And I believe that may, I think, form part of that strategy.
Okay, thank you. So it looks like it's a work in progress, and
Work in progress.
start of work, and perhaps staff can keep council informed. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anything further,
That's
Councillor?
it.
No?
Thank you, Mr.
Are there
Mayor.
any other councillors on other items that are in the consent? Oh, yes, Councillor Rediak. I'm sorry, I did say you were next. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to just acknowledge in a way beyond simply accepting the correspondence as a matter of consent items. The correspondence that we received from Maple Acre Library, the students of St. Anne. Some 10 students put their mind to the question of why a library is important to the community. And together, I think the students did a tremendous job of describing the value that a library brings. I think that's well worth reading and taking a look at. And as we meet tomorrow to talk about the practical issues regarding library services in Fenwick, it would be good, I think, to keep in mind not just the costs of a library service, but the value that that cost provides. Those kids put a lot of thought into the values that come to a community, described it very well in that correspondence. I think it ought to be acknowledged separately. So thank you for letting me do that.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. One of those letters is from my son, so full disclosure, I had nothing to do with the letter, and he didn't talk to me about it, he just sent it in, so, and I determined it wasn't a pecuniary interest because
He didn't pay you.
he didn't pay me, I didn't pay him, so anyways, that's why, but, so thank you for highlighting that, and the motion that's before us is that it be forwarded and included in the meeting tomorrow evening for that. Any other items? I have one, I guess two actually. One is regarding the proposed amendment to permit the institutional use, and I'm going to turn to Ms. Smythe. There's a letter there from the region that I found quite interesting, and especially the second page of that letter. The way I read that one paragraph about the record of site condition, I'm reading this, in the future, based on proposed tenants in the plaza units, mixed-use commercial, any potential record of site condition requirements could be addressed by the town's chief building officer under the Ontario Building Code. I guess my question is the region saying in that we didn't have to follow the zoning process, or am I confusing the what's being stated here? Can you just help us out a little bit here?
Through to you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the record of site conditions, so in a zoning amendment application, one of the requirements based on the sensitivity of the land use. So for instance, if it's commercial and going to institutional or to a residential, the Ministry of the Environment must issue a record of site condition, suggesting that there is no contamination, threat of contamination. If no planning applications, formal planning applications are brought forward, then that procedure is done through a building permit, and that's where the chief building official comes into play with respect to determining whether a record of site condition is warranted or not.
Okay, thank you. It didn't make any reference to the process, but to a different process.
That's correct.
All right, thank you for that
You're welcome.
clarity. I appreciate that. And then the final was on the recommendations of committee of the whole, and council will remember we did have a discussion on this regarding the rezoning of the arena, and the recommendation that was there was that more information be brought forward. I did ask the CAO about it this evening. He's unable to join us. So I don't know if the clerk knows or the treasurer knows, or Mr. Mantle. We're supposed to get additional information about that. Do we know when we're going to get that? Nobody knows? Okay, well, maybe that's,
I believe the CAO is working on it.
the clerk has said that the CEO is working on it, so we'll look forward to that at a future meeting. It was questions we had about, if we approve it, what is actually happening? So,
Yeah, and that's what
in
the
terms of the
that's what
triggering of the next step. And the neighbors were concerned about that, so.
That's a good point.
Okay, so we look forward to that at a future council meeting or committee meeting. Okay, unless there's anything further, are we ready for calling of the question? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is my report. And I think the only item that I wanted to highlight there was the installation dinner at the Fenwick Volunteer Firefighters Association that was held on the 8th of February. Again, thank you to the executive and members of the Volunteer Firefighters Association for hosting a number of councillors and myself at their annual installation dinner. A special plaque was presented to retiring firefighter Jerry Novosel to commemorate, as we did here in this council, 32 years of service. And I thought it was very touching how the commemoration also included a speech by Jerry's son Grant and also a slideshow of memories of his service, and that was very, very touching. And finally, as was stated at that event, it's the chief's intention, after they had presented a number of service awards, the chief is intending to bring a number of the firefighters here to council to present those service awards here. So we look forward to that at a future meeting. So that's my report. It has been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Kersey, that my report dated February 18th be received. Questions, comments? There being none, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. The next item is staff reports requiring action. The first has been moved by Councillor Lane, seconded by Councillor Kersey. The council received the issue summary report, Community Improvement Plan Opportunities and Form-Based Zoning for Ridgeville, and the council direct planning staff to further investigate the options available to amend the town's current Community Improvement Plan document. Discussion regarding this particular item? Councillor Ribbiat.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to just take a look, if we can, for a moment at the question of Ridgeville being designated as a hamlet. And the recommendation by staff, of course, that Ridgeville not be designated as a hamlet based on policies and within the region. Read that with interest, but I wonder if we can get some clarity, some greater clarity, of the impact of designating Ridgeville as a hamlet on any of the zoning issues that were addressed within the background. The read that I have of the report is that Ridgeville is currently being designated in a number of different ways in zoning, and therefore considering Ridgeville as a hamlet, or giving consideration to giving hamlet designation to Ridgeville isn't warranted. And I'm not sure I understand even yet what impact it would have in designating Ridgeville as a hamlet. How does that impact on zoning? What practical effect would that designation have on the zoning issues?
Okay. Ms. Smythe, can you help? If we could move with a magic wand and turn it into a hamlet, what would it mean? Essentially, I think is what the council is asking.
There is no direct impact on the zoning, so to speak, because the zoning, particularly along Canberra corridor, has the commercial rule component. So it allows for the agriculturally related commercial businesses to be there lawfully. The designation component, and the reason why staff have, both from a regional perspective as well as town planning staff, the redesignation of those lands would require municipal comprehensive review. So opening up the entire official plan for that particular area to determine the warrants of including the hamlet as it'd be more of a settlement area. Now, although Ridgeville is relatively small in scale, the primary function of that area is agricultural, and it's been identified as that in the Greenbelt Plan. So there are policies that we had to adhere to as part of the new official plan, as well as the regional plan. So we're being consistent with the message that we've received from both provincial and regional staff with respect to the opportunity to consider redesignation of that particular area. So to answer your question specifically, the impact from a zoning perspective, it's more the impact on the actual work that we've dedicated to the new official plan. We would have to kind of retract a little bit to determine the warrants. With respect to zoning, there are a lot of freedom within the zoning under the commercial rule to allow businesses to function and to serve the local agricultural community. So, but we are moving forward with the new zoning bylaw. And it will probably at that point, we could look at some opportunities to maybe see if there's willingness from both council, maybe direction and maybe coordination with the community in Ridgeville to see what is most appropriate when it comes to zoning regulations to suit their needs. I'm not sure if that's.
Okay, let's see,
been able
Councillor.
to-
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I understand the answer, designating Ridgeville as a hamlet would have no practical effect. That's really the zoning that controls what goes on with respect to the lands. But the exercise of designating Ridgeville as a hamlet would be extremely extensive, time-consuming, probably costly, and all that, so that there's no practical effect. Am I understanding the answer?
Ms.
Am I
Spike?
through? That is correct.
I think, Mr. Mayor, that it's going to be important that be understood by the parties that are interested in that designation. I understand that the champion of that, who made a presentation, including having hired a planner to prepare the presentation some meetings ago, is planning on coming back to us and making an additional presentation with what he believes to be new information. And I think that there is a view held by that individual and those that he is in the process of approaching within Ridgeville and gathering some energy around the question, that in fact designating Ridgeville as a hamlet might have some practical impact. I can only imagine, given the circumstances, what it is that they would like to see as a practical impact. I won't put words in their mouths, but I think that they believe that there's going to be one and that there is some energy developing around this question. And I think that it's going to be very important that people understand that there's no practical impact. Tomorrow afternoon, there's the region's integrated community planning meeting is going to be looking at their hamlet policy. I'm going to attend that just to see what the energy is around that issue at the regional level, and to understand, if I can from that, what impact they believe hamlet designation would be. I raise all this just, I think, to indicate that, number one, it's important for people to understand that point, but second, that we are going to be dealing with this again, and it's going to be, as this discussion goes on, it's going to be really important for us to have a policy, a good policy in mind with respect to how to handle this. This issue is at its beginning. It's not at its end.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Durley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if it would be wise for our planning staff to contact these people and to lay the cards on the table and say, this is the whole story, so there is no misunderstanding. If in fact they're getting some information that is contrary to what actually our planning department is understanding and has developed a policy for. And I think the educational piece here, saying when the new zoning bylaw goes into effect, that these are times where things can be there, like calling it a hamlet or not calling it a hamlet will have nothing to, no impact. So in fact, if this could be made public to them, and perhaps this will become public to them at the meeting tomorrow at the region, we have no control over that, but I think if we can communicate our side from here, staff, to talk to these people, that may give a better understanding, and in fact, some of the information that the interested party may have, thinking it's new information, may very well not be new information when we give them the full information which is available here. And I think that may like I say, if this is just the start of it, let's do it correctly at the start.
Ms. Smythe, I don't know if you've been in contact with,
Sure, through to you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Retina?
We have been in contact with Mr. Retina, I believe is his name, in the past. One other thing to make mention is not only cost implications with respect to a municipal comprehensive review, if town chose to consider Ridgeville as a hamlet designation, but there's also implications with respect to infrastructure. There's servicing, the roads, there's all these other kind of financial implications as well, that a hamlet, because it would be considered somewhat of a settlement area, that also needs to be considered. So with respect to meeting with Mr. Retina in the past, the primary intent through our pre-consultation meetings was through a consent application. There is some entertainment of his site to be severed into more than one piece. And currently our policies do not allow for that. And we had planning staff and regional staff had explained that to him. But I believe the designation may be something he would think would allow for that opportunity to present itself. So I think that's where there may have been the miscommunication. And speaking for the planning staff, I'd be willing to meet with him again to give that clarification.
sounds like that clarification is required. Councillor Durley, further?
That sounds wonderful, and it appears that there's something being missed in the translation, but if this can be relayed, perfectly, I'm sure so saner minds will have saner ideas. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any others to this? Councillor Power.
I'm not going to belabor this, but I think it is to our benefit to sit down with him again, because I too talked to him recently, and he went through the same thing, that he has new evidence that would suggest that there's some merit for this with his planning consultant. So maybe picking up with what Councillors Ribiak and Durley are getting at, if he wants Susan, is just lay it out to them, and so that they understand what the implications are, because I don't think they truly understand it. And if there is something there that he indicates that would allow for some sort of transition, I'll use that word, then I'd say provide us that evidence, show us that before we can continue down a road that could be, as you say, could be very extensive and very costly.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any others on this? I do have a couple of questions on this, and it's not specifically related to this particular property that we've just been dealing with. It's what you mentioned, Ms. Smythe, and that is regarding, and I'm looking for it here. You're saying that, I think it says it can be agricultural in use. Where is that? That's in the report before us. And the idea that the general commercial must be agriculturally related. Can you just comment on that?
Under the current zoning, commercial rule primarily is the zoning along Camberwell between Effingham and, I guess, east of Cream Street, Center Street. And so, actually, it's a smaller section, excuse me.
Yeah, it's surrounding Effingham, is it not?
Effingham,
Yeah.
essentially, yes. So the commercial rule specifically is
Commercial rule.
designed to meet the agriculturally related needs of that particular area. So, for instance, and I understand that there is some restaurant establishments there as well. That's also permitted. It's from a local base, but for instance, if a retail for fertilizer or feed for livestock was to go there, it would be permitted. That being, it's servicing the the agricultural community.
So I understand that piece, but
Yes.
then when I think of Ridgeville, I don't think about a feed store going there. I think about what's there. We have an artist store, we have a chocolatier, we have a great, shop, art and clothing. And to me, that speaks with the community improvement plan, which is calling on the tourist type element. So how does one marry the two? On the one hand, we have a zoning bylaw that says it's only agriculture related. And on the other, what's being proposed before us is, and you're still investigating, I know, but what's being proposed is that, well, we should have a community improvement plan to encourage tourist type operations. Can we just hear a little bit more about that?
Just to kind of add on, there are policies in the new official plan that speak to added value to agricultural community. So that being growing grapes and turning the grapes into wine or jam and selling that. So it's a value added, having a local market. The retail component with respect to local artisans, this is value added to that particular community. With respect to the community improvement plan that we have in place currently, it just identifies the grants that's applicable to downtown Fenwick and the downtown Fonthill. However, the new official plan has identified Canberra Road corridor between Fonthill and Fenwick as an important, attractive link between the two settlement areas.
Okay.
And that's kind of where we're trying to move towards the opportunity to, although there are some policies that strictly relate to agricultural related, there are some opportunities that kind of can look into a little differently with respect to being value added. So not directly related to agricultural, but have some sort of combination with, an association with.
Okay. That makes more sense to me than the zoning, which is, as you said earlier, supposed to be sort of specifically to agriculture. You're saying it's agriculture plus is what's being proposed, I guess, into the official plan or what's there.
Right. And to
Now it makes sense.
And to follow, the town is undertaking the new zoning bylaw. So in doing that next step, we will be looking at what the existing zoning allows for. Does it conform to the policies of the new official plan? And where there are discrepancies or differences between, it will be an exercise for us to undertake to see what zoning regulations would make sense. So if it means to eliminate the sale of feed in that particular location, then that's something that we would consider. But again, this is something for discussion amongst the community as a whole, prior to any decisions being made.
Okay, thank you very much. The shops of Ridgeville, as they're termed, and they have a sign on Regional Road 20, and they were on a mural for several years in downtown Fonthill, is a quaint area in our town. And, if there's a way that we can accentuate that and promote it, I think that would be helpful. And it sounds like this is the way, or a way to do it, through the community improvement plan, and also through the zoning bylaw. So I appreciate the clarity on that. Any others to that? So there being none, the motion is that we receive it and that we direct staff to further investigate options available under the current community improvement plan document to see if we can marry the two and achieve some of these things that we're doing. Councillor, sorry.
Sorry, I didn't realize we were totally dealing with the community improvement plan issue.
Okay, go ahead.
As I read the
And form-based zoning. And form-based zoning.
Yeah, and form-based zoning. Yeah. As I read the official plan, it's not necessarily saying that the Canberra corridor is a CIP area. It's saying that it has potential to be, and it's acknowledging it as a CIP study area. And so, having said that, and in your report you talk about perhaps needing to hire an outside consultant to undertake that study. And I think it goes beyond just amending our current CIP, which deals specifically with Fenwick and Fonthill. But it seems to me that we probably need we may need a separate CIP to deal with the Canberra corridor as a unique entity. Because CIPs are more than just grants and incentives. They are talking about the public realm as well. So we need to we need to have some visioning undertaken to look at what are the opportunities along the Canberra corridor for the, not only just the private realm and how we can stimulate that sort of improvement, but also within the public realm. So I think it would be really important for us to look seriously at hiring the outside consultant to undertake a full and comprehensive look at that whole question. Mr. Mayor, we also have talked around this table about a heritage CIP. We've also talked to some degree about an agricultural or agricultural gate type CIP where we could perhaps, as part of our economic development plan, put in place certain stimulation features to assist the agricultural industry in developing and enhancing that aspect of our economy. So I would think if we're going to undertake a CIP study, those are a couple of questions that we would maybe want to ask the consultant to look at and consider within the scope of that undertaking. So I think this, to summarize my comments, I think it goes beyond just amending the current CIP. I would be more inclined to support something that would be a more comprehensive study. So I guess that brings me, Mr. Mayor, to another question. Do we have funds available to undertake that sort of study? And I mean, we just got through the budget thing and none of this came up. So I'm just wondering where we sit with in terms of money.
Yeah, I don't know we have specific funds earmarked for this, Madam Treasurer.
No, we don't at this time. There is the, I mean, it's at council's discretion. We do have the working fund reserve that can be, you know, pulled to use funding for this type of study if council chooses.
But we don't know what the order of magnitude is yet on that.
Right.
So I guess the scope of work, those kind of things. Next steps, Ms. Smythe, in terms of bringing this forward. Councillor Kersey has suggested a few other nuances to it with a heritage and an agricultural. And maybe council needs to add those or amend those if council wishes, or just get the information that you're being proposed. So the next step with this amendment, or sorry, with this motion is to investigate the options available and come back to us. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I believe that planning staff will have to probably coordinate efforts with finance department as well with respect to the acquiring process as well.
Okay. The procurement process, yeah. Yeah. Well,
If council chooses.
yeah, it's so you're going to get a quote in essence on what that scope of work would look like. So I guess the question, thank you. So and it's only for this corridor CIP right now. It's not the expanded that Councillor Kersey spoke about.
Not at the moment, the way that the report was originally written. However, if council chooses to elaborate and expand the scope of work, I don't see there being an issue in that as well.
Okay. So back to you, Councillor, and I do see two other councillors.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It would seem to me that it you know, there may be some savings with respect to expanding the scope as we undertake this. You know, adding incentives for heritage properties or agricultural properties. We're dealing with a specialty agricultural area in part with the Canberra corridor anyway, so it would seem to me that we could broaden it to involve other agricultural, specialty agricultural areas within the community.
Okay.
As well. So I would like to see that added to the scope if we could.
Okay. I would ask that perhaps yourself and councillors on either side of you, if you could draft an amendment to that effect, and then we can add it to the motion. I think would be the best way to do that. Councillor Durley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I believe we're going off on a bit of a tangent here. However, I know we do have money set aside for a comprehensive zoning bylaw review. And in doing that process, I believe it will become evident that some advantages could be gained by looking at improving, and especially the corridor that we're speaking of, and looking at perhaps incentives in a CIP type plan. So I'm wondering if we could defer this until such time as we get into the zoning bylaw. I think we're putting the cart before the horse right now by saying we need we're going from step 1 to step 8 in the creative problem solving. So in fact, I'm sure the comprehensive zoning bylaw review will identify areas which we can improve these things, and I have full confidence that staff can bring them forward at that particular point in time. So I'm just wondering if we'd be a little premature right now to look at expanding a CIP that we really don't know where we want to expand it for, in my opinion.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I would, should you want to make that motion, I'd suggest it would be on the second clause of the motion before us, so that we receive it, and that you would defer directing staff to investigate options on the CIP.
Okay, in favor of collaborative work with the, connected with the the zoning bylaw review, okay?
Okay.
If you put that in there,
So
I
you
think that
want-
makes sense.
Do you want to make that?
Yes, I would.
You want to make that deferral motion now, so that you would defer the second piece, which is that council direct planning staff to further investigate options available to amend the town's current community improvement plan document. I guess you're deferring that pending discussion on the zoning bylaws would be.
Yeah,
you have something?
any evidence that can come forward from the comprehensive zoning bylaw review, because I feel that that would be an important piece, that when you look at the zoning bylaw and how we can improve places like Ridgeville, okay, now it comes, hey, if this could be done, why not give some incentives? I think a lot of good things can flow from that.
Okay, thank you. Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Papp will second that. We anticipate that zoning work to come forward in March, April, I think, April timeframe.
Yes, through you, Mayor. Yes, that's correct. Speaking with the consultant, a draft study has been prepared. It's with planning staff for review. Likely, yes, in the springtime we'll be coming forward
Okay.
with a draft report.
So are we ready for that deferral motion? I'm going to call the question on that deferral. All those in favor? Any opposed? That deferral carries. And now to the, I did suggest that it would be amended, an amended deferral. So now to the first portion, which is the receipt and the deferral. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Okay, thank you very much. The next item of business has been moved by Councillor Kersey, seconded by Councillor Lane, that the issue sheet report 2014-15 Ontario Sport and Recreation Communities Fund be received, and the council hereby resolves to support an application for funding to increase opportunities for sport and recreation participation in the town of Pelham. Any discussion to this particular motion? All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you for staff for bringing this forward. We look forward to you working on this, and hopefully there'll be some support there from others. Thank you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Lane, second by Councillor Kersey, that the issue summary report change of forum for prosecution of parking infractions be received, and the council directs staff to review parking bylaw 89/2000 and to A, determine the best course of action to incorporate an administrative municipal penalty system for parking for the town of Pelham, and B, recommend any additions, deletions, or modifications of sections of the current bylaw. C, review the current set of fine amounts for parking infractions and make recommendations regarding updating these fine amounts, and D, consolidate all traffic and parking bylaws currently in effect in order to obtain greater administrative efficiency. This bylaw would be intended to consolidate existing regulations and repeal predecessor bylaws. Discussion. Councillor Rybak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to the chief for writing the report. Spent some of the weekend reading the regulation with respect to AMPS and reading web pages of various communities that have this in operation, and it resulted in a number of questions. And I don't know whether this is the time to ask the questions, or are we waiting for the product of the motion to come back to us. But just to kind of indicate what some of those questions might be, it seems to me that there is the potential, I guess, that the municipality would be the same agency that gives the ticket as reviews the appeal of a parking ticket. And in a small community like ours, I'm not sure that that's necessarily going to be accepted as a fair approach to things. Second, I have a concern about the fact that there is the involvement of a hearing officer in the process of appealing a ticket, and a hearing officer, a screening officer and a hearing officer. So it leaves me wondering who those individuals would be within our organization. And third, I guess just a bit of caution that if there is the potential for the town to be collecting administrative fees, that we might be seen as developing an appetite for that kind of revenue. I know we're too small and we have too few parking tickets, but perception being everything, it was just something that struck me as something we ought to be a little bit careful of. So I just wonder whether we can have comments on that and then maybe include some of that in.
Chief? Thank you, Councillor. Chief?
Through Mr. Mayor, our current system allows for an in-house review. We have a supervisory review, so someone gets a Part 2 ticket issued to them. We have someone, and it's me, that they can come to, and I'll review it, and I can overturn the ticket or I can refuse it. And then it goes to the next step, which goes to a POA court, Provincial Offences Court. So the new system would be very similar, that the initial, we would issue the ticket, the initial stage for review would be someone on staff, say, we've already talked to the clerk, and it would be someone of that stature. And then if they didn't agree with that decision, then they would have the option to go out of this jurisdiction. And what we have on our sites right now is one of our options is to get together with a couple of the other municipalities and then get a couple maybe retired police officers, whatever, and they would be an independent review, and then they would be paid per item, and those costs would be incurred. That would give us the option for the defendant to incur those costs. So we're just trying to get away from us having to absorb all these costs. So this is basically the same process. It's just that the court is out of it now. The POA courts have dropped this. It's an absolute bottleneck, and it's not getting done. It's cost right now. It's currently taking 2 of your staff out of their daily routines to have to attend a court to defend these $20 tickets. It's very costly. This will eliminate all that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I understand completely the rationale behind this thing, and it makes perfect sense to get it out of the court system. What the chief has suggested with respect to a joint and shared activity with other municipalities, I think answers a whole lot of questions. So I'm pleased to hear that would be the direction that the report would go, and I think that would settle a lot of things for anybody looking at this thing critically. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Others? So we'll get more information as you work your way along, and I'm pleased as well that you're looking with other municipalities on that. Thank you. So I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. I look forward to your report on that, and so that we're prepared for July 1st. The next item has been moved by Councillor Papp, second by Councillor Kersey. The issue sheet report, water and wastewater budgets update, be received for information. Discussion. Call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. We look forward to March 3rd. And that work being done by the consultant. Thank you. We had an item added by Councillor Lane, parking at this building, I understand. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having had the opportunity to visit Town Hall many times during the business hours of the day, I find it extremely frustrating that there's no visitors parking designated in the municipal parking lot. And although I can walk 2 or 3 blocks and get here, I have no problem. I'm sure there are many seniors who would drive to Town Hall for business and not have any place to park. And what I would like to propose is either it be investigated by staff and or simply have 3, I would suggest 3 visitor parking designations inside the municipal parking lot for the convenience of the citizens of the town.
Okay. Thank you. Who can we give with that? I was going to say the chief, he's parking. But,
Treasurer, I believe, can answer these questions.
pardon? Who would it be?
I can comment just
Ms.
through you,
Buchwald?
Mr. Mayor. It is something that we are, that we have brought up to SMT, and we are in the process of establishing some sort of process for making the parking more easy for residents that are visiting the town.
Okay. I think the councillor is hoping that some action can be taken shortly. So when can we have an update on this, since you're the one that stood up, Madam Treasurer,
Falls to you.
for our March 3rd meeting,
Sure,
the resolution?
yes, absolutely.
Okay. Is that satisfactory, councillor?
It'll be up for the March 3rd meeting.
Don't hold your breath.
We'll look forward to some sort of resolution and perhaps some signs.
On tax day, there'll be a resolution.
You want to just comment on that?
Yes, well, on tax day, we typically will send a message to staff to make sure that they don't park in the vicinity closest to the entrance down here, because it does get busier at that time as
And
well.
that's February 28th?
February 28th, yes.
Okay, so maybe you just send them a message and say, don't park in this area today or
Or-
anytime in the future. Okay, thank you. We look forward to an update on the 3rd of March. Any further, Councillor, on that?
That's fine,
Okay,
thank you.
you. The next item has been moved by Councillor Durley, second by Councillor King, that the Council of the Town of Pelham, having given due consideration to the following bylaws, do now read a first, second, and third time and do pass the same, and the mayor and clerk are hereby authorized to sign and seal the bylaws. And there are a number of them. 1, bylaw 3468, being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw, 1136 as amended, west side of Hay Street lying north of Welland Road, 1120 Hay Street, concession 9, lot 3, to rezone the lands from open space to public zone. 2, bylaw 3469, being a bylaw to provide for advance votes to be held prior to voting day for the 2014 municipal election. 3, bylaw 3470, being a bylaw to provide for the establishment of a voting place at institutions or retirement homes known as Lookout Ridge Retirement Community, Short Hills Villa Retirement Community, and the Woodlands of Sunset, and to provide for reduced voting hours. 4, bylaw 3471, being a bylaw to repeal various bylaws pertaining to municipal elections, 1433, 3087, and 3122. 5, bylaw 3472, being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 1136 as amended, south side of Highway 20 West, west of Hay Street, 170 Highway 20 West, Plan 717, Part 2, part of Block X, to rezone the lands from general commercial, CG, zone, to site-specific, GC 242. And the final being a bylaw 3473, being a bylaw to authorize the use of optical scanning vote tabulators and touchscreen vote tabulators at municipal elections, and to repeal bylaw 2182. Any discussion? There being none, I call a question. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. Thanks to the clerk for her work preparing for the municipal election. We do have some in-camera items, and as is our normal course, it has been moved by Councillor King, second by Councillor Durley, that council recess the in-camera portion of the meeting and reconvene immediately following committee meeting scheduled for this evening. All those in favor? Any opposed? That motion is carried. This portion of the meeting is recessed. Thank you.